Imagine an essential worker clocking out of a grueling 40-hour shift. The uniform is still on and the paycheck has been deposited, but their next stop is not a house. It is the front seat of a 2012 Honda Civic. The conventional narrative surrounding homelessness relies on a specific image. A population disconnected from the workforce, struggling with addiction or mental illness. The reality in Oregon reveals something different. Essential workers who maintain 40-hour weeks have been priced out of the regional housing market. They live in a hidden shadow suburbia of sedans, SUVs, and cargo vans. These are line cooks, bank tellers, and medical assistants. They are the backbone of local service industries and supply chains. Yet their compensation is no longer tied to the cost of local real estate. In Pacific Northwest hubs like Portland, Eugene, and Bend, people living in vehicles now account for up to 50. For this hidden workforce, the traditional link between 40 hours of labor and a permanent roof has reached a breaking point. Much of this disconnect stems from how the government calculates poverty. The federal poverty level dictates that a family of 4 earning roughly $31,200 a year is not considered impoverished. That number is based on a formula developed in the early 1960s by an economist named Molly Orchansky. At the time, Orchansky calculated the poverty threshold by taking the cost of a minimum food diet and multiplying it by 3. This was based on the assumption that food constituted 1/3 of a family's budget, while housing was cheap and abundant. That calculation ignores modern costs, childcare, healthcare, and regional housing markets that have seen persistent, high-speed inflation for decades. Because this outdated math still dictates policy, these families often disappear from official poverty statistics even as they lose their homes. This creates a policy trap. Earning above the threshold, workers don't qualify for housing assistance or food stamps. Meanwhile, the local real estate market requires a minimum lease income far higher than this assistance ceiling. Millions of essential workers live trapped between these two numbers. They make too much money to receive help, but too little to survive the open market. To find the reality of the crisis, we have to look past federal metrics to the United for Alice project, which tracks households that are asset-limited, income-constrained, and employed. In Oregon, the actual household survival budget for a family of 4 is $91,052 a year. This survival budget is a zero emergency baseline. Every dollar is accounted for by rent, food, childcare, and the fuel needed to commute. Consider a dual-income household with common jobs. One parent working as a cook and the other as a bank teller. Their combined annual earnings total roughly $73,505. When we subtract that income from the cost of survival, we find a structural deficit of nearly $18,000 a year. A $1,500 monthly deficit cannot be solved by skipping meals. The mathematics of survival forces a single logical outcome. The elimination of their largest expense. To keep eating and working, they move into their cars. We operate under a universally accepted assumption. If you hold down a full-time essential job, your paycheck will cover the absolute basics of survival, namely 4 walls and a roof. But in Oregon, the data shows the equation has broken down. For a growing number of fully employed residents, the family car is no longer a way to get to work. By force, it has become their primary residence. Mass unemployment is not the driver here. Neither is a sudden natural disaster. These residents are facing mundane, everyday emergencies in an economic vacuum where the basic math of living no longer adds up. To understand why hard-working families are currently sleeping in their sedans, we have to look at the localized mathematical constraints making survival impossible. Let's look at this baseline equation. In Multnomah County, a single adult with 0 dependents requires exactly $20.64 an hour just to meet their basic independent needs. That might seem manageable, but the financial gap widens the moment a worker becomes responsible for dependents, triggering a demographic dependency collapse. The math shatters once that same adult has to support a preschooler and a school-age child. In Oregon, the cost of childcare for 2 kids often rivals the cost of in-state university tuition. As we update the equation to include those children, the required minimum wage for that parent skyrockets. They need to earn $49.50 an hour, over $103,000 annually, to maintain a baseline of survival without going into debt. Compare that required survival salary against the reality for an essential worker. A single mother working retail is likely bringing in around $18 an hour. Essential service and blue-collar jobs do not pay $50 an hour. When a parent is mathematically required to earn nearly triple her wage just to keep her children indoors while she works, the economic system has failed. Upward mobility or overtime cannot close a gap of that magnitude. This vehicular migration is fueled by a housing market decoupled from local wage realities. This pie chart visualizes a worker's monthly take-home pay in the state. Currently, over 52% of renting households in Oregon are severely rent-burdened, with 50 to 70% of their income consumed by rent. The baseline for this divergence began with the economic crash of 2008. Mapping the data since 2008, a line graph reveals the cost of basic needs in Oregon surged by 122%. Tracking inflation-adjusted wages, pay failed to track that trajectory, remaining stagnant. When an essential worker surrenders over half of their income to a landlord and the cost of childcare demands the rest, they are operating an intricate survival machine with zero financial margin for error. In a zero-margin economy, displacement usually starts with mundane inconveniences instead of a massive catastrophe. It could be a blown vehicle transmission that drains what little capital remains in the bank, or a basic $500 emergency room copay. These simple expenses, or a 2-week reduction in shift hours, trigger a missed rent payment. The eviction process follows. The transition from a housed employee to a vehicular resident hasn't overnight. For these families, the car is no longer a symbol of mobility. It is the last remaining financial life raft capable of keeping the family together and out of the state foster care system. Until wages reflect the actual mathematical cost of housing and care, the working-class neighborhood of the future will increasingly be parked along the street. When the public pictures modern urban homelessness, the image usually looks something like this. We expect to see chronic visible street encampments marked by blue tarps and weathered tents lining the sidewalks. But right now, a completely different demographic is rapidly expanding across cities in Oregon. These are fully employed adults clocking in 40 hours a week whose version of being unhoused carries none of those familiar visual markers. To keep their jobs, they have to maintain a pristine professional facade throughout the day. You interact with them constantly. They're the well-presented servers taking your dinner order and the drivers hustling to drop off packages through quiet residential neighborhoods. They wear the safety vests, handle the routes, and are fully active in the local workforce. These workers act as vital, highly visible participants in the regional economy during the day. Yet the moment their shift ends, they disappear, retreating into a state of total domestic invisibility. This hyper-vigilant invisibility defines their existence, a condition where active employment effectively masks the absence of a physical address. When the sun goes down, these workers disappear entirely into the asphalt landscape. They blend into the sea of parked cars resting under blue lot lights, turning standard sedans and cargo vans into hidden bedrooms. Maintaining the illusion of standard domestic life requires grueling high-stress logistics. Before putting on their uniforms, they rely strictly on 24-hour budget gym memberships, scanning in at dawn just to access the showers and restrooms. Their diet is equally constrained. Since cooking inside a cramped SUV creates a deadly fire hazard, they depend almost exclusively on dry goods and cold storage food. Then comes the exhausting task of stealth camping. To avoid detection, they have to constantly rotate their geographic location night after night, bouncing between the back corners of big box store parking lots and desolate, starkly lit industrial zones. They aren't just hiding from the public eye. They are actively evading predatory municipal towing ordinances and hostile architecture designed specifically to criminalize their presence in the city. The psychological weight of this lifestyle is immense. It is an existence driven by the constant paralyzing fear of a police officer knocking on a fogged-up window at 3 in the morning. Maintaining this double life requires tactical precision, turning every night into a meticulously calculated exercise in survival. To understand why fully employed people are forced into the system, we have to look past personal choices and examine absolute mathematical necessity. Over the past decade, regional housing costs followed an aggressive upward curve. Compare this to essential worker wages, which remained perfectly flat. The space between them is a massive financial chasm. Today, a dual-income family faces an $18,000 annual deficit just to afford basic shelter. At that deficit, traditional rent or mortgage payments stop being a financial stretch. They become mathematically impossible. Vehicular living then is the brutal but effective equalizer. Stapling in a car is the only logistical maneuver left that can balance an impossible household budget. For a growing slice of the workforce, the automobile has lost its historical function as a tool for upward mobility. Instead, it has become a required economic band-aid. If we take this historical economic data and run it forward 10 years, the reality of the working poor becomes even darker. Extending the chart into the future reveals a devastating projection. By the year 2035, the underlying mathematics will push that family deficit well past $35,000. The explicit consequence of this math is that vehicular residency will cease to be viewed as a temporary crisis response or a tragic anomaly. Look at the historical baseline for low-income shelter. In the 20th century, affordable housing meant massive, permanent brick-and-mortar structures that rooted families in a community. The structures replacing those brick buildings are municipal safe parking lots. Guarded by chain-link fences and lined with portable toilets, these asphalt grids are being quietly institutionalized as a permanent multi-generational tier of the American housing market. The only viable off-ramps from this trajectory are massive structural interventions, aggressive rent ceilings, significantly elevated wage floors, and the decommodification of basic housing. We are witnessing a permanent structural redefinition of the American working class, one where the asphalt parking lot replaces the brick-and-mortar home.